As a show, I thought it was amazing for so many reasons. First of all, the visuals on this show are very eye-catching, really great to look at, and it's what you really want to see from a fantasy/comic book show, so they nailed that out of the gate. Second of all, characters like Morpheus I thought was a brilliant portrayal, and whilst he did give me Robert Pattinson Batman vibes, that's not in a bad way, I really enjoyed that. I really liked his character, but I did feel a bit sad for him as he had this somewhat distaste towards humanity, and it's odd because everyone around him somewhat showed likeness to the humankind. He had this somewhat negative vibe towards the humankind only because of what he experienced, and so it was somewhat satisfying to see him slowly grow out of that negative vibe and actually go back to enjoying humankind. And even though he is having to deal with quite despicable human beings, he's still able to accept and love these people. Really interesting. On the opposite side, we've got the Corinthian, who, whilst wasn't on the TV show as much, still an impeccable character whenever he was on screen, but I did feel his end was a bit anticlimactic. When it came to the show, horror-wise, the show had so much horror elements, and it was never out of shock value as most shows do. It was more of like showing you how powerful these characters were or twisted, but also certain characters that their mistakes have huge consequences which they have to deal with, which is always interesting. But whilst it did have those horror elements, it also had humour rightly placed in. And specifically from the Raven, Matthew, voiced by Patton Oswalt, who I think did an impeccable job. Whilst he had minute comedy moments, but pulled it off brilliantly, he was also the warmth and heart of the show at times. When it came to the writing of the show, I think they absolutely nailed it. I think each episode was impeccable. There are 2 episodes that, for me, stand out as probably the best writing on the show for me, as whilst they do fit into the plot, they did feel like great standalone episodes. Now, the first one of these is episode 5. Now, the Sandman has all of his possessions taken away, including a ruby, which someone takes back into his possession after a while. So he has this, and he's in a diner, and he changes the way of these people into telling the truth. So they're all somewhat lying to each other, or at least keeping the truth hidden. And once the ruby's power's been used, they change and go into this depraved, horror-esque story. It's such an eye-grabbing episode, and probably one of the best episodes on the show for like visuals and storytelling. Now, the next episode we see from Dream meeting up with his sister, and they kind of getting some advice and following her through her job, and that being death. And it's really sad. It's not only is she having to somewhat comfort and deal with the death of old people who get themselves into accidents, but she also has to deal with death of babies and children. It's really quite sad. And she even talks about how she initially lost faith in her job and wanted to quit, only to realise that she needs these people as much as they need her, as she is comforting them at their weakest moment and helping them move on to the other side. And I thought it was really great writing, and that was the first half of the episode. And the second half, we see Dream, after hearing this, decides to meet up with an old person from the past, and it's a person from the 15th century who claimed that he would be defeating death, and between him and death they made a deal of actually allowing him to have this wish. So this person and Morpheus would meet up every 100 years to talk about his life every 100 years and still ask him, do you still want to be alive? And even though this person has got from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows and somewhat in the middle ground at some point, he still always hits, I still want to be alive. Death is a sucker's game. And it's really actually a really great episode. And if this show actually does get a second season, I really do hope that they continue making 1 or 2 standalone episodes like this, because honestly, some of the best television, just like standalone episodes of the year. Now, while I would say after these 2 episodes, after episode 6, the series was on a somewhat decline. Not in, I would never say in a bad way, it just wasn't as good as those 2, but it's still quite good. And we still get interesting characters like the Vortex, who is a girl called Rose Walker who has the powers of Sandman. And what happens is we see her accidentally using these powers, going into people's dreams unintentionally. Kind of reminding me of a SpongeBob episode, but in the darkest of ways possible. When it came to other plot lines within these last 3 to 4 episodes, there was a great one called the Serial Convention, in which, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it was really interesting, this whole plot line, and we see how the Corinthians involved. It was nice to see characters who didn't know what this was about walking in and then realising, oh, this is a scary ass area, this is fucking weird. Like Rose and Gilbert, they walk into this convention assuming what it was, only to realise what it actually was. It was really funny to see, and the way they wrapped this one up was actually a really cool ending, as we see Dream punish these people, giving the victims somewhat justice for the hurts that these people have done. Really impeccable. Great TV. When it came to the finale episode, I have to be completely honest, apart from some subplots here and there, I did feel a tad unsatisfied, as I feel like certain characters' problems were easily wrapped up here and there. But when it came to that last 10 minutes, I felt the ending was much better, as we see Lucifer Morningstar get this last great ending, and it really made me look forward to the next season if it does happen. So overall, I think this show is very good, and while I guess I would say the first half of the show is far ahead of the second half, I still think altogether it's a great, enjoyable ride that I definitely would recommend. Is it good? I'd say it's very good. Ranking wise, I would say a nice 8 out of 10. Now, when it comes to recommendations, I'm not the biggest Neil Gaiman fan. I know some of his work here and there, and that's what I'm going to recommend. I haven't seen all of the stuff I'm recommending, but it's stuff I'm going to watch after watching this. So first of all is Lucifer, which was a character in the comics who got his own spin-off and then got his own TV show. The TV show in question is actually not too bad. It's quite funny, quite dark. Not as dark as this, but still. And I enjoyed the first 2 seasons. It's season 3 onwards I didn't watch. I just fell out of interest, but I'm definitely going to go watch it again. Season 1 and 2 were still interesting. Next is Constantine, who again was a character who originally started off in Swamp Thing before appearing in 2 issues of Sandman before getting his own comic series, and then he got a film adaptation where Keanu Reeves played him. I thought that was really good, but I'm here to really recommend the TV show, which Matt Ryan played John Constantine. He does it in League of Gentlemen and the Arrowverse, but I really preferred his TV show, even though it was only 1 season. Definitely a great adaptation. Next is his books. Now, Neil Gaiman has done many books, and the 2 that I'm going to be talking about is first American Gods. Now, the adaptation I did see, I heard all about the controversy and like the delays and shit. The first season was interesting, and whilst I struggled to get into it, like plot-wise and just like timing, I thought it was still interesting, visually very beautiful, and plot was interesting, but yeah, I struggled with it. I lost interest, but I'm going to go back to it. And last, but I would definitely say not least, is The Good Omens, which is on my wish list. It's currently, I think the 2nd season is being made as we speak, and not only does it star David Tennant, so that's enough reason to go watch the 1st season, but it's also based on a book written by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which is a cool ass duo. That is, I'd say it's kind of like having Garth Ennis and Alan Moore, Frank Miller and Alan Moore, or Alan Moore and fucking anyone. Yeah, Alan Moore and fucking Neil Gaiman, which that has happened, hence Sandman. Those are my recommendations. This is my review. Hope you enjoy.